Lot to talk about. We've got a jam-packed show, and don't adjust your sets. Gerry Green is back on camera. We're excited for everyone to tune in. Sports QuaranTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports QuaranTV. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green, back in the hot seat. Gerry, good to see you, brother. It's been a while. I know we haven't seen your smiling face for a bit, so it's so good to see you. But at the same time, got to give a big thank you, of course, to Adam Lund and Jeremy Boucher for stepping in and coming on in. You know, they made sure that the show continued to roll. But brother, it doesn't matter. You are here. You are back. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight.
Yeah, let's get to it, Chris. And of course, yes, they are great experts when it comes to the Q discussion that you had in the last few weeks, because there was a lot of news going on there. So let's start there.
I was going to say, sticking with the QMJHL, let's start there. We're going to do a small final piece here. I want to get your final thoughts because I haven't had a chance to pick your brain on it. Overall, the QMJHL season, were you surprised by the ending? Were you shocked by any of it? You know, what were your overall thoughts? And also at the same time, I'd love to get some thoughts about the future. I mean, many early expectations after the draft of what the Maritime Division could look like next year.
Yeah, I enjoyed the season immensely. I thought the Q final was good with Halifax, and the two top teams is what you want to see in a final. And Halifax gave Quebec all they want. Quebec was just, and you could see it in the Memorial Cup too, Chris, how stingy they were, how good a defense they had, and what a good goaltender they had, as Halifax did too. But the thing I loved about the Rampart going out there and Patrick Waugh then all of a sudden mysteriously resigning as the head coach and general manager, so find that very interesting, is that the fact that it's the fourth straight Memorial Cup championship for the Q. Now you go back, you see, well, Quebec won this year. St. John won at home last year, which was just tremendous. We didn't have it 2 years in a row, and you got to go all the way back. Runa winning the championship in Halifax in the Memorial Cup that Halifax hosted. And then remember Bathurst in 2018, all the way out to Regina to beat the host team for the 100th Memorial Cup. And poor old OHL and WHL. The OHL hasn't won since 2017 when Windsor won. And the WHL, Chris, hasn't won since 2014 when the Edmonton Oil Kings won the championship. So I was very proud and very appreciative of the hockey that comes to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. I don't care what the other leagues seem to think about the Q. Obviously, they can't beat them, and the Q keeps proving that over and over again.
You know, what's really interesting for me is going into this Mem Cup, and again, I'm a little bit of a homer when it comes to the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. I look at it from a perspective of, Seattle was the team to beat going into this tournament. Everyone talked about how good Seattle was and no one was going to beat them. They were the best team in the league and this and that. And I was like, yeah, you know what? That final game of the Mem Cup was absolutely perfect. Again, Quebec's best game of the tournament, bar none, but they looked good the whole way. And, I love that for the Q because everyone talked about how the Q was the evil stepbrother of the Canadian Hockey League. And
right.
Look, they're making a lot of people talk now.
And I think, I don't know if Quebec changes a little bit without Patrick Waugh there, because he must be such a presence, Chris. There must be such a calming influence. And what he says, you have to take as gospel. He's been there, done that. Interesting, Chris. Patrice Brisebois was in Miramichi for the Timberwolves auction and dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I had a chance to talk with him and ask him some questions, not only in front of the audience, but privately too. And I asked him about Patrick Waugh. He played with him in that 93 team that won the Stanley Cup.
Right.
And you would
For who?
That.
For who?
And Brisebois said a couple of things that were very interesting. He said, at 22, winning the Cup, I thought, geez, we're getting a lot more other chances to win this. This would be great. And, of course, you never do. And he says you cherish every moment that you have. And he said Patrick Waugh was the type of fella that if he had something to say, he'll come right to your stall, right to your face, and tell you, good or bad. And that's the way it was. And he respected him terribly. And everybody on the team respected him. When Patrick Waugh opened his mouth when he played, people listened.
Well, speaking of Patrick Waugh, I mean, I know that obviously once he announced his official departure, and I know that he said at the beginning of the summer, like last summer, that this was his last year behind the bench. And we knew he was leaving. The question was, of course, as soon as he comes out on top with a Mem Cup ring, how many NHL teams were going to come crawling and look into his name? And, obviously he was linked to the Rangers, but there was like 6 or 7 NHL coaches who were on the move. But a story came out not that long ago, I think less than a week ago, that said, as of this point, he hasn't even gotten a phone call. Like, that's stunning to me.
Interesting,
Like,
That
I
is.
thought for sure that's where he would be, but overall, hey, look, he's going to go down in his final game as a champion. My big question mark is going to be, look, they have that beautiful building in Quebec City. You know, they're going to put 18,000 people in there. Can they sustain that? Will they continue to sell tickets now that Patrick Roy is no longer behind the bench? What impact did he have on ticket sales? And of course, they're going to come back off a rebuild. Anyways, I don't know. These are the things I think about at nighttime when I'm lying there. And it's, and again, kudos to them. But overall, my hat goes off to the Quebec Remparts and exactly everything they've done. And I love every time the Q represents well. So Patrick Roy going out as a champion is okay in my books. But I do want to talk about quickly. I want to get your thoughts. I know we mentioned it early next season. I know it's still too early yet, but I love having these, not prediction conversations, but I love having these. Hey, what are your expectations? I mean, Moncton looks like they've made it. Look, first of all, they had a great first round in the draft. You don't want to sleep on Moncton, and Halifax is still going to be good next year.
Yeah, there's still some holes to be filled. And that's the thing, Chris. I still think Halifax has that major core there.
Right.
That is still going to be very good. And, Charlottetown still, I don't think Charlottetown had a first round pick in the draft this year, maybe not even a second. I think their first pick was in the third round. So they're still rebuilding. It's going to be an interesting Maritime division. And so watch out for the two Nova Scotia teams in Cape Breton and Halifax. They can be the ones to watch come next season. But it's time for Cape Breton. It's time for them to start to be a presence again in the Maritime division. It's been about 5 years, 7 years, maybe, Chris, that you don't worry about the Cape Breton Eagles. They're not going to challenge you, or not challenge you, but they won't. They don't go very far in the playoffs, and if they do make the playoffs.
Well, you know what? I had a good laugh because I saw the interview that came out with the owner of the Cape Breton Eagles, the new owner of the Cape Breton Eagles. That team got purchased not that long ago. I think it was like less than 5 years ago, I believe, Jerry. And anyways, the new owner came on out and said that, like, he's tired of not seeing depth in the postseason. And I said, you're not. Imagine how your fans feel, because they've been there a very long time. So I agree. I'd love to see Cape Breton get off. I love every time I get to watch a Cape Breton Eagles game to hear our good buddy Pat McNeil on the call. I think Moncton, I mean, they made out with a king's ransom by trading Fillion at the draft. And you saw, I mean, the net, Steinman's their guy. They made some big moves, already brought in some big names. Apparently there's a rumored massive free agent coming to Moncton. All rumor and speculation at this point. Never heard about it. But I hear there's a huge name coming to Moncton. So we'll keep an eye. We're going to keep our eyes close and ears close to that. Jerry, let's move on to the National Hockey League, because I want to get, the Stanley Cup's been awarded. Former Moncton Wildcat Ivan Barbashev now has his second Stanley Cup. Phil Kessel now has his third Stanley Cup. I mean, great win for Vegas overall. I mean, is it one of those situations where Florida just ran out of gas, or was Vegas that good?
Yeah. On the Barbashev subject, Chris, he was an integral part. He was an integral part in St. Louis as a third liner, an integral part again in Vegas, and made some big plays and at big moments. And so that makes me happy.
Media said
for a
that
young
was
man
the
like
biggest
him.
trade of the deadline.
Oh, yes.
Overall, that's what some of the
it
media
appears it
reports are
had
saying.
be. It just seemed like Vegas was way too heavy for Florida. Even though Florida loved to play the body through the Eastern Conference, this Vegas team was a big, heavy team. And it wasn't just a few big, heavy guys. There was a bunch of big, heavy guys. And it just, the wear and tear of what Florida had to do to get there, I think, just finally. And, Kachuk could be the poster boy for that. It's just finally they just could not get over the finish line. And full marks to the Vegas Golden Knights. But the Vegas Golden Knights have to thank the Seattle Kraken for knocking off Colorado. I think Colorado got surprised in the first round, and I think Colorado was one of those major contenders in the conference. But then again, Chris, the first round of the playoffs was craziness, of which you had Tampa Bay, Boston, and Colorado all getting knocked out in the first round. But full marks to Vegas, just a few years at it, and they have a Stanley Cup. Yes, it can be done. But I think, that particular expansion draft certainly aided them. But they're not afraid to make big moves either, Chris.
No.
They got Eichel, and they go get Barbashev, whoever they need, and they do it with a no-name goaltender is what is amazing to me, that even in that Edmonton series, they had to go to the Hill, and he carried them right to the promised land.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up Edmonton, because I'll tell you right now, nobody was more happy for Vegas than Edmonton was, because Edmonton was, in my opinion, I had them pegged to go, Jerry. I had Edmonton and Boston in the final.
Yes, of course. Why wouldn't you?
So at that point, if you're looking at Edmonton, I mean, Edmonton took them right to the brink, and they were the only team that challenged Vegas to that point. So had they gotten there, I think it could have been a different story. But overall, I agree with you. I think, you look at what Vegas built. Second time to the Cup final in 5 or 6 years since they came into the league. First Cup win, 6 years, because I remember McCrimmon was talking about when they first came to the league. He said, make the playoffs 3 or 4 years in a row, win the cup in year 6, and that's exactly what they did. So overall, I tip my cap again to them. It's my new slogan. I'm going to tip my cap to everybody I can think of. But overall, yeah, good on Vegas. I do want to ask you though. Okay, overall, the biggest underachiever on this season, or even possibly the biggest surprise in a good way.
Well, I got 2 for you. My biggest underachiever were the Pittsburgh Penguins. Fair. Pittsburgh Penguins, by losing to Chicago and Columbus, lost to Columbus in overtime, lost Chicago at home, allowed Florida, well documented, to even make the playoffs and face Boston in the first round. And what has Pittsburgh done during the offseason, Chris? They've stocked up with Maple Leaf management. I don't know if that's good or bad. We'll see what happens as they've been busy off the ice getting their front office in order. And my biggest surprise, and puts a smile on my face thinking about them, is the Seattle Kraken, over 100 points during the regular season, winning in the first round over Colorado, and doing it with really nobody that I really recognize, Chris. And they're doing it with good coaching, balanced attack, and goaltending. And it was a pleasure to watch them. And they were my surprise during the regular season and into the playoffs. So Pittsburgh, my disappointment. Kraken puts a smile on my face.
So I had the Kraken in the good way, just like you did. I fully agree. What a great storyline. Good for the NHL. From an underachiever perspective, excuse me, I was expecting more out of Columbus this year. I want, after getting you see Johnny Hockey go down there and, start that whole situation, and everyone was talking about how good they were going to be. And he chose Columbus because he wanted to win, and turned out to be an absolute dumpster fire down there. But overall, like I said, that to me was my biggest underachiever, but I do have to agree with you. Nothing feels better than a feel-good story. The Seattle Kraken reminded me a lot, not quite to the extreme, but it reminded me a lot of that Vegas story in their first couple seasons. Obviously just not as exciting, but overall, that's it. Let's look at odds now. I mean, now the Cup's come and gone. Last season, everyone's forgotten about it. Excuse me. Let's talk about next year. I mean, early favorite for next year. You'd have to put Colorado up there. You'd have to.
Well, I don't think the fellows that were there are going to disappear. Who I hope to move up and make more of an impact and maybe get into the playoffs. 2 particular teams that I like, Ottawa and Buffalo. I would like to see either one of those, and they've been stocking up on young talent. I know Ottawa is trying to do something with DeBrincat, and hopefully they'll get good value back for him. But I think they got a great, young, exciting team, and I think Buffalo has the same. And I would just hope they can make a difference in a crowded Eastern Conference for sure. But those would be a couple of teams. I think you're still going to have the regulars near the top, Chris. And they come and go. The Islanders come in, they go out. Jersey comes in, they go out, and somebody else replaces them. So, we'll see what happens. But those 2 teams are the teams I'm going to enjoy watching next season.
So I agree with you. I think another team I'm really excited to watch are the Rangers next year. I think the Rangers, if they can get everything together, they get the right coach, I think they'll be fine. I do question what's going to happen with the Leafs. Overall, there's a lot of decisions to be made there right now with Treliving coming in. Excuse me. He's his first big move, of course. They hired Shane Doan, and I'm assuming you bring in Shane Doan to keep Austin Matthews. So I don't know how that's all going to look. I mean, you'd have to think that Austin Matthews is about to get the captaincy off John Tavares' jersey if there's any hope for him to stick around. But at the same time, I want to see what Pittsburgh's going to do. Moving Dubas and now Spezza into Pittsburgh. Could we see something happen? He made that comment about the Malkin, Crosby, Letang thing. I don't know. But early favorite to me, it's still Colorado. I like the Oilers, but I'm going to go with the Rangers as well.
Yeah, and I see a lot of things going on in Winnipeg, Chris. I follow them very closely, and it really does have to happen. There has to be a wholesale culture change there, and I think it includes Connor Hellebuck. I think it includes Scheifele, and I think it includes Wheeler. I think those 3 guys, Hellebuck, I think the Jets are thinking they can get some great return for him. And again, I'm not even talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois, who of course,
Well, I assume
during the season wanted to leave
gone.
Winnipeg. So what you're going to see in Winnipeg is a lot of changes, and don't be surprised if you see Hellebuck move. Don't be surprised to see Wheeler or Scheifele go. It's about time. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. Ever since Dustin Byfuglien left Winnipeg, they've been on a downhill slide, and so maybe they can find some leadership that's not so uppity up, I guess, as Scheifele and I guess Wheeler were hard to approach from all the things I read from the Winnipeg media. So I see a lot of things happening there, Chris. So I'm really looking forward to the free agent frenzy, and I'm really looking forward to the draft that happens next week. There's going to be a lot of things happening for sure.
All right, Gerry, as we record this show, it is the first day of summer. So let's leave the ice. Let's head to the ball diamond and let's talk about your Blue Jays. I want to get your thoughts at this point.
Jays.
Is it time to panic? I mean, they're not as good as we thought they're going to be. When the season started, everyone had big expectations for them. Mm-hmm. At this point, do you even think they're still a playoff team?
They're definitely a playoff team. You look at the wild card standings. Like there's a lot of teams still right there again, and there's 95 games to be played. They played 75. They got another 95 to play, and I don't worry. I'm not worried about them. I am somewhat confused about Manoah and why he was so. Watching him pitch, Chris, it was like he was trying to make everything so perfect, and he walked so many people. That's what his biggest problem was. He couldn't throw strikes when he needed to throw strikes, and now he was 1-7 when he left, and they're trying to fill the gaps while he's gone. Chris, I wonder this, because Vladdy has 9 home runs. He's second on the team with 42 RBIs, but he's not as flamboyant as he used to be. Chris, I still see teams carrying on with props after home runs. Do you think that whole jacket thing disappearing had some sort of deflating value to Vladdy or even the team itself, that it became more business and not as much fun?
Thank you for asking me that question, because I had this conversation with some of the boys the other night at the bar. You know me, not a Blue Jays fan by any means, but I do enjoy watching the Jays. One thing I was a fan of, and we mentioned it on this show time and time and time again, is how much fun the Jays were having in that clubhouse. Every time, the home run jacket, although it's small and it's minor, they eliminate it because of those postseason losses. Last year, Seattle was a heartbreaker. They should have had that one. But overall, it's like, why change the culture? Now, Vladdy's not having the year that everybody was expecting. They were expecting to see another big season out of him. And in regards to Manoah, I know that, and this is just my thought, because not just mine, it was also in the media, but I agreed with this thought. And that was when they brought in the pitch clock, a guy like Alek Manoah, who's not typically your starting, right. Like he's not your poster child for Men's Health Fitness. But what I'm saying is you're sitting there watching him, it threw everything off for him. He wasn't, he didn't have the same stamina. He didn't have it all. He was constantly throwing. So maybe that's what it was. We don't know. We're not there. I have no idea. But overall, I think if you look at the whole scenario, the Blue Jays, to answer your question, I know I went a roundabout way to get there. The home run jacket, I absolutely agree with you. I think you take away something like that, it's not fun. They're not having fun. Something's gone. Something's been lost. And maybe it's too business, because the Rogers spent all that money on the building and they're like, no, we're a business. We're not here to have fun anymore. We're here to win. This is a business. No, dump that. Go back to having a good time.
Yeah, I just hope Vladdy turns the corner. I mean, his stats aren't bad. I mean, he's, 275 with a batting average, but it's the home runs. And they say he hasn't hit a home run at home yet this season. So I like to see that happen. Chris, can we move on to the U.S. Open? Because I found it highly entertaining. I find it entertaining, one, because the guys didn't tee off till 7:00 our time, which was great. It was
awesome.
Got to stay up all evening to watch the whole, every stroke from hole 1 to hole 18. And it goes to show, Chris, we say the adage around the golf club all the time: you drive for show, you putt for dough. And Rory McIlroy can certainly drive the ball, but he did not make any putts on that particular day. And the Clark was just, struggling a little bit at times, but just moving and making pars. But Rory had lots of chances but he can't putt, Chris. How many times have you seen highlights of Tiger Woods making long putts, good putts, not little putts. I'm talking about big putts and the big pump and the energy that comes from it. I've never seen Rory with any great ability when it came to the putt.
No, I agree. And you know me, I love me some Rory, but I wanted Rory. I was rooting hard for him. But it was, yeah, you're right. It was the flat stick. It killed him. And I was really hoping to see something better. I did think though, and I was really excited. I knew he was right there. I was rooting for Ricky, man. I thought he was going to get it done. I thought
yes,
saw Ricky in the final day.
Chris.
I know I wanted it to happen, and then it just he couldn't put it all together in the end. But I love the Canadian Open and the U.S. Open. I thought they were both amazing golf tournaments. Thought it was great. Loved them both. But I honestly did think I thought that it looked like after 20 under par after would win the whole thing after round one. But that course seemed to toughen out throughout the weekend.
No, Chris, it didn't feel like a U.S. Open. It didn't feel like he got punished as badly. It was certainly a very unique layout, and I love that where they had the challenges. But the ball rolling down into a certain area for all the players and all the divots and stuff that they talked about on one particular hole. I think it was hole number 3. But I found the course very interesting, a lot of fun, and to finish, I've never seen a course, the back 9 or the front 9 finish with a par 3. I've never seen that in my life, and I find that very intriguing. But there was a lot of back talking about what LA, they don't like having it out there, but I enjoyed seeing it in the late time.
Oh, to me, it was watching that hole. I think it was like 86 or 88 yards on that awkward, there was a hole, a less than 90-yard hole. And I was like, oh my, I feel like it could be me. That could be me, Gerry. I can hit it an 80, 90-yard hole. But overall, like I said, I agree with you, though. I didn't feel like the U.S. Open we are used to. But it was nice to see a couple of the guys I thought would make some moves, especially after the news of the PGA and Live from 2 weeks ago. Rory was trying to make that comeback and make it all happen. So at this point, I hope Rory can build off this, figure out what was wrong with his flat stick. But anyways, I love the tournament overall. Thought it was great. The late night times were absolutely fantastic. And that was it. Well, Gerry, it's been like riding a bike. This thing has run so smooth since you've come back, but it's time. We've got to hit it. It's time for the wrap. We're going to start in the CFL because the CFL's off and running. Have you been watching? What have you noticed so far?
Have I been watching? You know me. I love football. I love Canadian football. I grew up on Winnipeg Blue Bomber football. And guess what? Winnipeg Blue Bombers are in first place in the West. Well, it's 2-0. BC's 2-0 as well. And the defending champs from Toronto, the Argonauts, are 1-0 over in the Eastern Division. But the game of the week this week, the BC Lions come into Winnipeg to take on the Blue Bombers. We'll see who's undefeated after Friday night. The CFL's off and running. Great summertime football. If you get a chance to watch, it's good entertainment. Speaking of football, good entertainment this weekend, Chris, the MFL Championship.
Absolutely. The MFL happening. The Moncton Mustangs will be taking on the Nova Scotia Buccaneers. I know people are wondering, well, that doesn't sound familiar. Well, this is only the second time in 10 years, Gerry, that the St. John has not been in the MFL final. Moncton's going to be looking to cap off with their 4th straight. This weekend, that game's at Rocky Stone. Of course, what led up to this, Moncton beat Halifax on a super cold day here in Moncton last Saturday. Nova Scotia upset St. John last week. It is going to be a great time. Rogers will be covering that game, so you'll be able to catch that game on Rogers TV. But overall, I love watching local football live in action. I had a chance to check it out last week. You're not going to want to miss it. Get there if you can't, but if you can't be there, watch it on TV. All right, Gerry, hit me with some New Brunswick senior baseball. It's also off and running. Give me an update there.
Yes, loving it as well. And you know what, Chris? The team that's in the league, not from New Brunswick, is leading the league. The Charlottetown Islanders are 7-1 currently. Of course, as usual, in June we ran into a lot of wet weather, so there's some differences between games played by most of the teams. But here you have Fredericton at 4-3 in second place. St. John's played 10 games; they're 5-5. Chatham is 2-5, and Moncton sits in the cellar at 1-5. Game of the week this week in this league, Chris, as the St. John Alpines come to Chatham to take on a pair of games on Saturday afternoon against the Ironmen. Both teams want to get on winning ways, and so that'll be an interesting encounter on a nice Saturday afternoon for baseball on the Miramichi. Chris, the Habs have some new news. New signing. Who is it? Why?
Hey, I know this is going to thrill you, Gerry, but overall, I actually love this signing. The Habs came to an agreement with Sean Monahan on a 1-year, $1.985 million deal. Of course, the injury-prone forward who we got from Calgary, along with a first-round pick, just as a salary dump as Calgary was making that big push for Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau. So Montreal said, "Hey, all right, we'll take your hand-me-downs. We think we can revive them." But overall, we only played 25 games last year before going down with an injury. But at that point, put up 6 goals and 11 assists for 17 points, and that was on December 5th. But overall, great signing, low risk, high reward. Hopefully, he can stay healthy for a full year. But either way, good extension from Montreal. Speaking of hockey, Gerry, let's talk about the AHL Calder Cup, because as we are recording this, the Calder Cup finals tonight.
Calder Cup Game 7 final in California, Coachella to be exact. They got a brand new arena there for the Firebirds. The Firebirds are the farm team for the Seattle Kraken. And so they're hosting Game 7. Jeremy McKenna, Jacob Melanson, and Shane Wright are familiar names for you for the Firebirds, Chris. On the other side, they're taking on the Hershey Bears. So here's how it went. Coachella won the first 2 games at home. They went to Hershey for 3. The Bears won all those. Now Coachella won Game 6 at home, trying to win Game 7 at home in front of a sold right out arena of 10,000 in Southern California. So that should be an interesting counter. On the Hershey Bears, you have Henrik Lapierre. We remember him, Chris, and we remember Zach Ficali. He's a goaltender for the Bears and still property of the Washington Capitals, who the Bears are the farm team for. So big Game 7 would have happened last night, but it'd be interesting to see who's going to take home the Calder Cup in the AHL Championship tonight. The other night. NBA has some trade news, Chris. What is it?
Well, as this show is airing, the NBA draft will be kicking off, of course. And, obviously before the draft, big moves get made. And we're going to start in Phoenix and Washington. There was a big deal done last week. Bradley Beal on the move. He's heading to play for the Suns. Bradley Beal, Jordan Goodwin, Isaiah Todd. The Wizards are going to receive Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, multiple second-round picks, multiple swap picks. So that was what kicked it off. And then right before we started recording today, the big move everyone's talking about is Kristaps Porzingis heading to the Celtics, and of course Malcolm Bogdan to the Clippers in a 3-way deal with Marcus Morris and Danilo Gallinari to Washington. But overall, this is where things start to get a little hectic come trade time, come draft time, excuse me. I know that, Raptors fans are potentially looking to see if they'll move that pick to move up in the draft. There's some good talent, and of course, this is the Wemby year. So overall, big trades happening. This won't be the first and won't be the last couple trades we see before Thursday night. Sure. Anyways, so stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. Well, Gerry, it's been a lot of fun. Welcome back, my friend. It's been great to see you. I know we're going to be airing a couple episodes throughout the summer, but this is our last regularly scheduled show we'll be shooting. But overall, thanks for doing this, brother. I hope everybody at home has enjoyed our show this season. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you when we see you.